Welcome back to Coach-to-Coach. Today's guest is coach and law of attraction guide Paula Vickers. Paul and I recently met on Jamie Smart's Clarity Certification training. Thanks for joining us today, Paula. It's so nice to see you.
Oh, it's really great to see you too, Greg, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm
Yeah,
just going to love this conversation with
great.
you.
Yeah, me too. It's my pleasure. So the way I like to get these things started is to ask what first sparked your interest in coaching?
Yeah, that's the question that everybody asks, don't they? And I have to say, I have never really been interested in coaching,
Mm,
or at least I've never been interested in the ideas that that word brings to mind for
mm,
me. I think I've got a sense with when I think about a coach, unless it's somebody specific, when I think about coaching, I kind of think about somebody telling me that their version of the world
mm.
is a better version than my version of the world. And so I should step into their version of the world, which is completely wrong. That's not what coaching's about, but it's just kind of an idea that sticks with me.
Yeah.
So I was never really drawn to coaching, but all my life I've been obsessed um, with how and why we experience things as we do, how we experience life. And I was brought up as a Catholic, and and the church was quite a strong. It was a very strong part of our lives, certainly as I was growing up. And but there always seemed to be kind of a disconnect for me between what we were taught and what what we experienced in
Mm,
a way. So it was like I could never get round this idea that I mean it seemed to me that if God was always in that church, why would I ever want to leave that church? You know, why would I ever want to step outside the door? So I had lots of questions, and um our kitchen dining table was like a boardroom. There was like nothing off the table. We talked at every meal time. And
mm,
so my dad particularly was would kind of encourage the discussion. But my dad had a very elastic conscience. He was a very spiritual man, but he was a bit
mm,
mischievous and he had quite
mm,
an elastic conscience. But my mum was very fearful. She was a very fearful Catholic
mm.
and she suffered mental illness from being in a sort of, I would say, mid-teens. Um, and a lot of it seemed to center around her experience of the church and being very fearful of God.
Mm.
And um, and this was back in the 50s. So, it was mental health was dealt with very differently then. And when I came along, it was just like I couldn't get to grips with how different her experience of life was to, for example, mine and my dad's.
Mm.
And so I think my obsession with understanding humans and how we experience life really it was there as soon as I could, you know, notice things. As
Mm.
soon as I had that ability to notice and speak and question um and then I I didn't go to university. I wanted to do a particular role. It was hairdressing, funnily enough.
Mm.
And my mum wouldn't let me do that. So I was forced down a job track that didn't suit me. And I went into career after career after career and did lots of study. Um, and but this obsession never left me,
Mm.
never left me. And so throughout all my explorations, eventually I ended up in this like coaching space. And it was specifically, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of The Secret, but I think it came out in
Yeah.
2006.
Yeah.
And I listened to all the teachers. Um, I would do the ironing, listening to the teachers. You know,
Mm,
just trying to get my head around these things. And in the end, I hired one of the coaches from The Secret, um, Bob. I can't remember his second name, but that was my first introduction
mm,
to a coach. And from there, I went on to study the law of attraction. I did a coaching certification, but I didn't do the certification because I wanted to be a coach. I did it
mm,
because I wanted to understand
yeah.
what was going on. And it was really interesting because that was the most, I would say, the most transformative thing that I'd done in all through my life. I'd done undergraduate, graduate, postgrad studies,
Mm,
but it was that thing that I kind of thought, oh, this is I've really changed through
mm,
this. Um, and that exploration has just continued. And as part of that first program, we had to coach people that we didn't know.
mm,
So they would supply the clients, and then we could choose what the program was. And from the get-go, I did like 3 sessions, at least 3 sessions with everybody. And it turned out that I really enjoyed it and people were getting results.
mm,
And I was fascinated even more then. So I've just continued along that exploration, um, having conversations, Greg, having conversations and and watching what happens.
mm, yeah. Well, I can imagine that in those conversations that your obsession with curiosity and exploring would be very helpful for the people that you know, I don't know if you want to use the word coaching, but that you're coaching or sitting with or having a conversation with that's a great place to be coming from, that curiosity and openness to exploring. I'm curious, with all that exploring that you've done, is there, either the biggest insight or whatever comes to mind first in terms of your big aha moments where you're like, oh my God, I see it so differently now, or but if you have an example of something like that.
I think I think it's been a continuous drip feed. I always say that I come from my direction with coaching, real with partnerships,
Mm,
is kind of informed from the intersection between law of attraction. I don't know if you've heard of Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe
the name
Dispenza.
sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah, his work is phenomenal, and then clarity. But for me, it's 3 principles, not as described by Sydney Banks,
Mm,
but it's as described by Jamie Smart because he was the first person that I heard talk about the principles in a way that connected with me.
mm,
So it's not dissing Sydney Banks at all.
yeah.
It's just that I vibed and I had a few little experiences um, where I would say I kind of disconnected from my human experience,
Mm,
um, and just was in an experience more of awareness rather than being a solely the human experience. So they kind of nudged me a little bit.
mm,
And then in the first program that I did with Jamie, I was in a peer coaching conversation with a chap, and he asked a question, Greg, and it was the most innocuous question, but how it happened I have no idea, but it was like I just had a big smack on the side of my head and I was knocked fully out of my human
mm,
experience and into just pure awareness. And and from that space or from that state, I mean, the question was, what do you really know?
mm,
And my answer was, oh, nothing, because there's nothing to know
mm,
from that broader perspective and pure awareness. Because my experience during those moments was that thinking and experiencing life as we do as humans is solely a human thing,
mm,
solely a human experience. And knowing, as in knowing I've got a phone here, knowing I've got a bill to pay,
mm,
or, reading books, that's a subset of the whole experience. And so that was a huge insight for me.
mm,
It was an insight that I experienced fully rather than just something that occurred to me as a thought and made sense. It wasn't about making sense. It was about, oh, now I understand
mm.
because now I've experienced something different. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. Sounds like the kind of experience that us coaches hope for with our clients.
Yeah. Because that does all the work for
Mm,
me. I mean, once you've had something like that, there's just never go back to business as usual.
mm. Yeah, it's amazing when you come back kind of into your body, into your human experience from an insight like that. The whole world looks different than it did beforehand, which is the power of insight. I like to think about my coaching practice as a lot of people I talk to who don't have experience with coaching. They think of coaching as giving advice, and I usually try to explain to them that yeah, I'm not in the advice business. I'm in the insight business, and helping people like you just described with your peer coaching. Something as simple as a question can guide somebody into that insight friendly space, and um, yeah, and everything changes from that point on. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely a door opener. And it kind of it set me up really, Greg, because I've talked before about the physical the health challenges I have, and I don't think that I would have been able to navigate certainly the cancer as graceful is not quite the right word, but as much without fear,
Mm,
if I'd not had that experience. Um, yeah, because in those moments where uh, certainly with when there's the second diagnosis, when I had moments of terror,
mm,
real fear and distress about what my family would have to go through again, having just we'd lost my mum about
mm,
2 years before. Um, if I'd not had the experiences that I've had, I think I would have been lost in the experience of my thinking. And
Mm.
because like thinking can overtake us like a wave, can't it? It's like, you might be surfing along at one moment and then this massive wave engulfs you. And um yeah. So for me, the biggest gift that I can bring to a conversation is that sense of perspective that there's more.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned your Catholic background earlier. I grew up, my parents became Salvation Army ministers when I was a teenager. And before that we were Anglicans, but like, growing up as the son of ministers, obviously, religion and spirituality is quite important in our family. And I remember my parents had this rule, like when we turned 16, we could decide whether we still wanted to go to church or not. And of course, I was the middle child, but as my brother turned 16 and then I turned 16, we chose door number two. We're not going, much to the displeasure of our parents. But I don't know if it's just being an angsty teenager or whatever. But there was like, that's not for me. And now here I am, in my early 50s, and the whole spirituality kind of part of my life has kind of come full circle. And um, I see religion and spirituality in a totally new and different way than I ever did before, and less so. And I just see a lot of alignment between whether it's the three principles or other modalities and the same thing that religions are pointing to. They're just different models of the world that are trying to explain pretty much the same phenomenon. So um, yeah, and I like to think about it more from the perspective of like less about the fear and stuff that is ingrained in us in various religions. I married a Catholic, and my kids went to Catholic school, so I know all about the Catholic guilt. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just the, kind of the, I don't know how I describe it. Um, the infinite love of what God, the universe, the infinite wisdom behind life has to offer, right? Like it's and embracing that side of it, um, versus and acting from that place of wanting to be of service to people, um, and for the purpose of spreading the love and the good feelings and insights, and not about being afraid of anything.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's funny you should say that because I think I first read, I don't know whether I read or listened to Sydney Banks, and this is years and years ago,
Mm,
long before I met Jamie. And and it sounded to me like I can remember my reaction. It was like, this is a little bit too much like Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and I've had a lot of
mm,
that already.
yeah.
But from where I am now, again, it's like, oh, I get it now.
Mm,
It was like my ideas and the structures that I created internally from, as humans do, as we all do, from my upbringing. It was like, oh, this was a structure to explain what's unexplainable.
mm,
And my structure, I mean, don't get me wrong, I had and still do have a great love for God and
mm,
Jesus and all those energies, if you like. It's like, oh, the structure was the thing that tripped me up
mm,
and my mum up, not having that. broader understanding of that it was a structure, that all religions are structures, man-made structures
mm,
to describe rather than the indescribable.
yeah,
And as you say, it's like, oh, if we can come from love,
yeah,
that kind of covers it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the thing I like with Sid Banks stuff, even though it's positioned and promoted and talked about as the three principles, but then it's often just talked about as love and understanding, right? So it's kind of like that's the part of it that I've kind of embraced, I guess, more than the structure of the principles part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I should move on to our next question. So the next question is, tell us about your practice, how you're working, who you're helping. Like, how do you bring your this coaching slash not coaching into the world?
Yeah, well, it tends to be, I don't have a formal practice, Greg. What tends to happen is people will say, people who know me
Mm,
or who maybe have worked with me already will say, oh, you should speak to Paula.
mm,
Um, that's that's happened more times than I can remember. And then we just have conversations, and if it flows, and people start to feel differently and see the world differently, invariably, if you see the world differently, you get different results.
mm,
Um, so that tends to be um, how I come to people, or how people come to me. And quite often it's around work and like a desire to be doing something else,
mm,
or there's something a little bit funky at work, which is really interesting because that's always been my path as well. Um, but yeah, so that was actually the scenario when I first thought, oh, this could be like I could have fun with this
mm,
through my very first coaching client. And she'd had, it was an extraordinary gift for me, really. This this lovely lady, she was a journalist. So she was accomplished journalist, a
mm,
political journalist. But she'd moved continents and she didn't want to write political stories anymore. She wanted to write human stories. But what she was finding was that if she wrote human stories, she wasn't getting paid, or she would
mm,
only get paid a little amount. So she had to choose between writing the stories that her heart wanted to write and writing the stories that paid the bills. And she got into, as we do, such a kind of a funk with it that she was actually thinking, I don't know if this writing career is for me anymore. And she knew about the law of attraction. She didn't know that much, but she knew something, and what she knew kind of vibed with her. And we worked together. We only worked together for 3 sessions. And she was really easy to guide into, although it felt to her like she was in a quite a fog.
mm,
Um, she actually had quite a lot of clarity below the fog. And so once she was guided into that clarity, things just shifted in extraordinary ways.
mm,
The stories came to her. Um, she started getting paid really well for them. And what that did for me was to show me, it gave me evidence of how it really does, how it really does work,
mm,
and if we can be given a space where, and just the tiniest bit of structure to get clarity about who we really are and what really lights us up and let that lead, then, changes can be, and they don't have to take, we don't have to be in it for the long haul, we don't have to wait 5 years and go on 15 training courses.
Mm.
Although I admit I like to do that, but it's not God, the universe, however it works, it can work very quickly.
Mm.
So I love that because it's about uncovering what drives people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. It's fun. I hear Jamie often when he starts like a weekend of training or something. He'll say something to the effect of like, "Are you open to the possibility that everything could change for you even as soon as this weekend?" And he said most people start going, "Oh, no, I've got things to do. I've got to clear out my sock drawer, and it's this
Yeah.
weekend's a little too soon."
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah, things
true.
things can change quickly. The other
And
thing,
painlessly.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be painful.
yeah. The other thing I've seen with some of my clients too is the we kind of tend to have this notion that things are forever, right? Like I need to make a decision that's going to put me on a new course, and that'll be the course I'm on for the rest of my life. It's like, well, no, that's just the course you're going to be on until you find another course to take. Like it's, um, you know, there's all these ebbs and flows in our life, and things that are fit for purpose and useful and in the right path for us today. A week from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, may no longer be the case. I mean, you know, we we have the ability, like it's not a one and done. Like transformation is a lifelong process.
Yeah. I love how you've put that. I certainly had a long period where I used to beat myself up
Mm,
because I'd go into one thing and I'd go into it really deeply. And then at some point, like a good while down the line, I think, no, this isn't for me.
mm,
And so it felt like, oh, Paula, you can't stick at anything.
mm,
But when I look back, Greg, over those periods of time, I learned so much that was relevant to my path as a whole,
mm,
as a lifetime path. And I think that's a really good point that you make that, you know, what we're doing now doesn't need to be forever, but it's almost like we can take the benefits that it brings
mm.
into the future, even if we don't take the full practice there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know this is a tough question, but if there's one thing that you'd want people to know, what would that one thing be?
It's not a tough question for
Oh, okay,
me.
great.
No, it's not. It's because for me it's really simple, and I think it might be one of Jamie's, but there is always hope.
Mm,
While there's breath and life, there's hope. And it's not that hope that says, oh, I'm going to hope for the best.
mm,
It's literally because once we know who we are and who we're not, and the nature of how our experience works and life is delivered as an experience through us, there's always hope because, as we've already said, things can change
mm,
literally in a heartbeat. So that's my one thing. And, I've started one of my careers was, or part of it was working in hospitals. And I would sit, I never sat in the nurses station. I would go sit with patients.
mm,
And quite often I'd sit with patients who were dying.
mm,
And and quite often people are a bit scared. I mean, there's lots of scenarios,
Yeah.
but just to be able to sit there and hold somebody's hand and to transmit that understanding just in your own sense of calm that it's okay.
Mm,
It's okay. We don't have to be engulfed by our feelings because there's more.
mm,
There's always more, no matter how bad it looks. So that's my one thing.
mm. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of Sydney Banks at the beginning of The Missing Link talks about, I think the quote is, there are those that don't believe in miracles. I can assure such skeptics that with hope and faith as beacons, anything is possible. So yeah, always having hope. I love that. If people want to learn more about what you're up to, Paula, where can they find you?
Well, my LinkedIn is quite out of date.
Mm,
I'm just living my life. So really, if people want to find me, they would find me on the Book of Faces
okay.
or just by email. And that's manifestingreboot@gmail.com. I'm not all into this website, Malak, all that stuff. I think it's great for people who are, and I love
Mm,
to look at everybody else's, but it's kind of not me. I'm just kind of, oh, let's just talk.
yeah. No, I love that. There's something simple and hopeful about that. So,
Yeah.
well, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Paula, for joining me for Coach to Coach. It's been great getting to know you a little bit more and hearing all about what you're up to. And yeah, I love the message you're communicating out to the world. So it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I've loved it too. Honestly, I always love these conversations, but it's been a pleasure to share that conversation with you.
Thanks, Paula. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye.